Hi, welcome back to Django Chat. It's a fortnightly podcast on the Django Web Framework. I'm Carlton Gibson, joined as ever by my co-host Will Vincent. Hello, Will. How are you? It's been so long.
I know, I'm good. Hi, Carlton. This is the first one since mid-July. We had a little break for the first time. We were just discussing before we went online. We have 7 kids between us, all under the age of 12. So that's been interesting, but everyone's juggling stuff. But it feels nice to be back in sort of a routine, I guess, with school, virtual and otherwise.
Yeah, no, for me, it's still very much like swimming through treacle. Like literally, the kids finished school on the 13th of March and they went back on the 14th of September. So that's 6 months, literally 6 months out of school. So, 2020, I saw a tweet the other day when there's only 3 months of 2020 left. But mentally, I never left February. I really resonated with me. I'm like, yes, that's exactly how this year's gone. But, anyway.
Yes, but, Django. Stuff has happened. So as you mentioned in the intro, so we are going to be going every 2 weeks going forward. We did weekly for 74 weeks in a row, but we're going to be going every 2 weeks. This episode, we're going to be talking about the Django community survey, updating everyone on what's happened in Django the last couple of months. But most of the episodes are going to be guests. We have a whole bunch of guests lined up for the fall that we're excited about. So it'll be mainly guests talking about using Django out in the wild. What's happened? 3.1 came out, Carlton. You and Marius.
Yes, it did. Yes. Well, Marius was release manager for that. So he basically did all the hard work. And I was there with like the supportive cup of coffee and metaphorical, remote coffee and remote donut. I was like,
Yeah. Did Tim Graham
videos
pop up
this
donuts. Time, or is it the first without him?
No, he didn't make an appearance, but he has been active. He's been working on the Cockroach DB backend. I think there's progress there on making that more fully featured, because Tim keeps making these little PRs, so that's nice to see him in action.
I've seen that. Well, that's good. And there's already been a security release, so 3.1.1 and 2.2 whatever that came out a couple days ago.
Yeah, so that wasn't super high priority, and there was a strange make dir. The behavior of make dirs changed in Python 3.7 to not set the permissions of intermediate directories that it creates. And then so when you run collect static or whatever, you had to make sure that we were setting the correct permissions. It's not a particularly high impact one, in that if someone's got access to your file system, you've probably got bigger problems already. But we got that out, and we got a lot of quick fixes out. So the point one, the 3.1.1, that first point release is always quite hectic because there's new features, and then people finally try, give them a try against their production environments, and they find all kind of issues. So a few with the new admin sidebar, CSS kind of issues. We'll resolve those, or we resolved a lot of those. With a couple more that will get resolved in 3.1.2, and then hopefully it should be like, we've got the worst of that. JSON field, a couple of little ones there, and a few regressions in the ORM where you change, if you've got particularly complex queries, which, aren't antecedently covered by the test suite, because it's like I'm aggregating here and then grouping by, or the group by and then ordering on the aggregation. It's like these things can be tricky. So a few of those.
The ORM can be tricky. Yes. Well, kudos to that. I'm glad, that came out.
Well, kudos to Marius, really. I mean, Marius worked like an absolute Trojan, is the phrase. He really, he really sweated it. And it's my turn for 3.2, so I'm a bit like, oh.
Oh, is that how you're alternating? Is that the plan?
Yeah. Because we alternate the monthly releases, but then also the major releases, we take turns on those, because they're a lot more work.
And 3.2 will be the
2 or
LTS.
3 days of hardness.
Will be the LTS.
Yeah.
So. Is that even more work for the two of you?
No, it's exactly the same. Like the LTS is just the same. Sorry, there was a mosquito trying to eat me, so I just had to attack it there. The LTS is the same. What can I say?
Not the same. I'm smiling because we make a lot of efforts to have good quality audio, and you're smacking your hands loudly for all the guests.
Yeah, no,
but
sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, no, sorry. I do apologize. But mosquito versus guest, it's like mosquito.
Yeah. What else? I updated all my books, so this time I was able to use the beta release, as you would say, and so they all came out. I had to redo screenshots for every single admin view because there's the new admin sidebar, but also the Chrome browser changes. So anyways, it's complete, start to finish, redo of everything, but I was able to get that out and then take a little bit of a break So that's
I read
good.
you wrote a post or perhaps just a series of tweets where you were saying that rewriting the books is kind of like I can't remember exactly what you said, but more like doing scales. Yeah, you use the analogy of scales, where it's like because you go through it and you tweak it, and
I'm trying to be zen about it. Yeah, I think that's accurate. That because I go through for every major release, I go through everything from scratch, new code base, new screenshots, and it is the bane of the existence of people who create content is you have to update it all the time if it's technical, and so most people don't. And I'm on now my fourth or fifth time updating for Django. I think the first time I did was 110. But yeah, I think it is sort of like musical scales. So I play music, my kids play music, and we spent a bunch of time during the break with my brother-in-law, who's a professional violinist, and he plays 5 hours a day, and he plays scales every day on top of everything else. So I think there is something true about that going through, because there's things that change in Django, there's things that change in Python, there's externalities, but there's also just how I feel about teaching stuff changes. So I try to, it is an opportunity to do that. I mean, for example, some of the changes that I made in the book, the book size changed actually. So the paperback trim, it was 8.5 by 11, and now it's more closer to 7 by 9, which is more standard sized. So people probably won't notice that, but that was a whole ton of work for me to do. And
that's going to be harder to find on the bookshelf now.
It'll be hard to find on a bookshelf?
Yeah, because it'll blend in with all the others. It'll be camouflaged.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to have, hire a professional designer and make it all perfect, but I update it all the time. So, but anyways, I think it's better. The pathlib is a big change in 3.1. So the settings.py file defaults if you do start project to pathlib. I updated everything to use pathlib instead of just OS. What else? And I guess the other one that I've had a bunch of questions about is I decided for project names, in the past, I would, if it was a book project, I would call it book_project or, to-do_project. But I've adopted more the calling everything config. That's a project folder. So it's completely superficial, but I implemented that in the books as well as I've been doing that in my tutorials, because I think it's one less thing to worry about, because it is one of those things that you have in every project. And so it just seems, I like to standardize it. And I think Jeff Triplett cued me onto that pattern. So
that's because you've got a folder full of apps, and then one of those apps isn't really the app, it's the project folder, and it's got the settings and the root.
Yeah, so that's why I would make a point of doing, _project, which just to reinforce that. Anyways, so yeah, those are out.
That's a good thing.
There's so many moving parts in a Django project and app. So to the extent that some things are standard, try to name them as such and treat them as such across the different examples that I give. What else?
Yep.
Django People has been sunsetted. So that was a project that's been around for a long time, not really maintained. There's a post up on the Django site we'll link to. It wasn't being used, so it redirects to, I think, that blog post.
Just a holding page now. Yeah, just a holding page. I think that's the point. It wasn't being used and it wasn't being maintained. And so whilst Django Snippets is still being maintained and that's up to date, and that's keep going nicely, Django People was in need of love. And then there's folks who are like, I need to reset some credentials, or I need to change some details, and they weren't able to log in, and we weren't able to recover accounts. And at that point, it's no longer sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, because there is this constellation of Django things that are maintained by the Django Software Foundation. So now Django packages will be moving into that orbit. What else is there? There's there's a list of things that the ops team is in charge of. So anyways, people won't probably miss it, but that's changed. Django News newsletter. So that's something I've been doing with Jeff Triplett. That's still going along. We'll put a link. That's a weekly link of all sorts of Django news, projects, videos. There's a whole bunch of conferences that have happened. So PyCon Australia happened. There's a Django track. We'll link to that. PyCon Africa happened. There was a whole number of Django talks. We'll have links to that. And DjangoCon Europe is coming up this weekend, which you're speaking at.
Well, yeah. Well, speaking at, I'm busy trying to make a recording. So
it's virtual.
My talk's about optimizing model choice field. And in order to have an example for that, they've got this crazy database query that goes insane. And then trying to record the demo, I wasn't actually able to record the demo because my computer wouldn't capture the video and process all the database requests without doubling the time because it was busy. Like, I don't know what they do, time sharing. And so basically I'm having to go slides only because I can't do the demo. But I hate live demos. Even recorded live demos.
So live coding, even a recorded video, doesn't work, is what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I'm not live coding anything. No. So I'm actually happier that I'm doing slides, but that means I'm still working on it, even though the deadline's really soon. But it's fine. I'm quite excited about it.
Yeah, well, there's a great list of talks. So there's your talk. Adam Johnson has one on how to hack a Django site that I'm really interested to see because he would know. Tom Dyson of Wagtail has one on new ways to deploy a Django app. Marcus Holderman has one on migrations. Aaron Bassett has one on HTTP headers. Sage Abdullah has one on cross-DB JSON fields. Andrew Godwin's there. So there's a whole list of people. I'm really excited to see the talks.
Yes, I am. I'm excited about Tom Dyson's talk because he's going to look at 3 different ways of deploying from the first one being like a static site. So what I want to know is, how's he going to get a static site out of his Django thing? Is he going to use WebGet and mirror the Django side, or has he got a little command line tool to do that? I'm quite interested in that. I think the second one's like a more normal deploy, and then the third one's some sort of containerless, serverless, all in space number.
Yeah, no, I'm really interested to see. I think it's going to be great, and I'm glad that the conference is happening. I think there's 2 more things, and then we'll get into the survey. So Django technical board vote is coming up. So this is a really big deal. This has been in the works for 2 years, I think. But Django will have a technical board of 3 members who will be the final deciders when there is a big issue. Is there anything more you want to say on that? So people who are members, there's 200 odd individual members of the Django Software Foundation will be the ones who vote on that. And that election is important and upcoming.
Yeah, well, all I'd say is that this is the culmination of the whole dissolving Django core or renaming Django core and introducing a more modern governance. Django's such a big project now that it needed something more formal than what it grew up with when it was a much smaller project. And we've talked about Django core and how it became stale and various other things, and not representative of the wider community. And the technical board, this final technical board election, is kind of like the final piece of that DEP10 change. We've had the mergers, we've had so Maris, myself, and Claude are the mergers, and then we've got Maris and I do the releases, and that was all part of DEP10. But the thing we've been missing is this official election of the technical board.
Yeah,
so I was excited about that.
Yeah. I'll mention one last thing that the Django Software Foundation has been doing is adding corporate badges. So corporate members will now have something they can show on their sites. That will be up soon.
I'm working on that this week, actually. So.
Yeah, so that's a good something for the corporate sponsors. So that's important. Okay, community survey. Should we get into it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, this was super.
Yeah. So this was. And this happened right before I took my break too. So I sort of just put out the charts and was like, peace for a couple of weeks. But we had fantastic responses. We had 4,379 people responded, which is great. And we hadn't done a survey in 5 years. The last one was Tim Graham had done one in 2015. But Python has an annual survey, and there's for the fellows and for the the core, not the core teams, but the Django developers, it's important to know what usage is because Django does not track anything. So we're very much in the dark on what people are using.
Yeah.
So this was really, I think, will hopefully guide future discussions around, we'll go through them, but how is it actually being used, which database backends, all that kind of stuff that we can only wonder about.
Yeah, so you sort of, and you do a lot of work on something, you're like, well, is anyone actually using this? And it's nice, but so... let's jump the gun. There was one on the test framework. Well, which test framework are you using? And we do a lot of work on the Django test client to keep that up to date and keep that running. And who's using it? Well, it turns out a massive proportion of the user base are using it. So those features,
yeah, because it is, you sort of wonder, is everyone just using PyTest? Why do we bother? But
yeah, and it's
right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's one. We'll come back to that let's go through them in order because otherwise we'll get lost. We'll cut back and forth.
Okay, yeah. So there's links to them. It's up on the site. So the first one, the question is, what is your primary operating system? And so I think for next year, I'm going to rephrase this, because I think the better question would have been, what is your local operating system and what is your server operating system? So 45% said Linux, 27% Mac, and 27% Windows. I think I suspect the Linux question is there's some combination of your server, not just your local client, because anecdotally, at least, yes, people use Linux, but I was surprised by this. So we could ask it in a way to confirm that it's actually local client versus server.
Yes. But the big thing for me was that there are as many people, bar a margin of 0.2 as many people using Windows as on Mac. And it's like,
Yes.
we always think Windows is the minority operating system. No, it's not, right? It really isn't. And
yeah,
well, especially just because the regular Python, contributors are either on Linux or Mac.
Yeah, I'm certainly biased against Windows. I don't have too fancy computers I work on. I use mainly Mac. You use a Mac. Andrew Godwin's on Windows. Other people are on Windows. I know from my Install Python 3 site, there's tons of people looking for Windows installs. But if anything, I thought that Windows would be bigger than Mac, or demonstrably bigger. It seems about the same. So that was an interesting question. I think for next year, hopefully this will be an annual survey that we can do. I would want to distinguish between client and server, because I suspect some of the Linux is that. But moving on. So so when you start a new project, what do you use? So 75% said they use the latest stable release, and 30%
well done, 75%.
LTS. Yeah. And I guess maybe if you're starting a new project, why wouldn't you be on the latest one? It's more a question of, in practice, it's the upgrades, which maybe we can even skip to, where people say, how often do you upgrade? And the majority say every stable release. I think it's probably difference. There's a difference there between a corporate site and a personal site, because that's fantastic to see, but most companies I know are behind. They're not on the latest release.
Yeah, it's difficult because, there's a whole series of questions around upgrades, and one of them was how easy it is, and there's a big bump around easy, and then a few people okay, it was harder, and we can dig into the reasons why it's harder in a minute, but why, for me at the moment, why would you be on the LTS? There's just no reason to be on the LTS. You should be on the latest version, because if you're not going to maintain your application, then fine, you might think, we're not going to maintain it, we'll be on the LTS because we don't have to maintain it. But if you're not going to maintain it, you might as well be on the latest version, because it's got loads of bug fixes which the LTS doesn't have. Right. And if you're not maintaining it, well, what's the difference?
Well, and that's, so there were responses to a couple of questions, including how do we make upgrading Django easier? And I think one of the things people point out is that, it's always your dependencies. So it's third-party packages.
Yes.
The major third-party packages, by and large, are excellent at staying up to date. But, who knows how many you're using, dozens and dozens, and then maybe you have something custom. And, so I know that is why companies fall behind, is because the dependencies, it's not Django itself.
But this is the thing, is that you get there and you think, I need something, and it's like, I'm just going to bring in this package, and then 6 months later you realize that you can't update because it's unmaintained, or it's it's not compatible with the new version. And then what are you going to do? Are you going to dedicate the resources to commit back to that upstream package and fix it? Are you going to somehow patch around it? Or are you going to, you've got to be really cautious about taking on dependencies. A lot of Django third-party apps are awesome, but a lot are something you could build in an afternoon, especially if you've had a look and you've sort of seen, I'll take inspiration for that, but I'll write my own version because then I'm on top of it.
Right. Well, you and I are in that camp. I think that is definitely, as you progress in your Django career, you are more wary of taking on something. And so absolutely, for me, I'll take a look at the source code, and if I think I can reverse engineer it pretty easily being within a couple days, then I'll do that. But yeah, so that's part of it. One of the good comments was someone was asking about a Django admin command to show deprecation warnings, because I do think that a lot of people don't use the -big W to see the warnings flags. I don't know if we can make that clear in the docs, or that's a little bit of
it is.
superficial.
I mean, there is a whole guide on upgrading Django, and it does say this.
Yeah,
right?
maybe it's an education issue more than anything else. There is a whole guide.
The issue for me is with that kind of thing where it's like putting a wrapper around functionality that's already there, is that wrapper needs to be maintained, and it increases the surface area of the code base,
right.
and then it takes away from quote unquote real features, real work. Like I understand that if you don't know how to run with the warning flags enabled, then that might help you discover it. But if you just read the doc one time, you'll know about it.
Yeah, I agree. It's we don't want to just put wrappers on wrappers and wrappers. It is there. If you search for it, you'll find it. Once you do it, once you know about it, you use it all the time. I don't know if I think we do. Is it linked to when there's a new version that comes out? I don't know if we put it if it's put in the release notes.
I
think it is.
We'd have to. There's a thing at the top which says, how to update.
Yeah. Well, in any case, listeners of this podcast know about the flags and to use them.
Right, but like, how do you learn about these flags? You learn about these flags by the first time you need them. But let's have a look. Yeah, so at the top of the 3.1 release notes, it says, "See the upgrading Django to a newer version guide if you're updating the existing project." Right, that's right in there in the first before you get anywhere. And then it says about Python compatibility. So I don't know. I just think that adding that kind of stuff is great in principle if we had much more human power available to developing code on the framework, and we don't. So we have to be very selective about what code we take on and what code we add. And people are, can we have this really minor feature that will add a teeny bit of complexity for this corner case? It's like, well, no, implement a subclass, keep that in your own project, because if we implement each little minor edge case, it becomes unmaintainable.
Yeah. Yes. Well, speaking of resources, so one of the questions, which built-in database do you use?
Right.
Postgres, the dominant one, as expected. SQLite second. MySQL and MariaDB. So MariaDB is just basically a different version of MySQL, an open source version of MySQL. Oracle's at 2.2%. Oracle is always one of those ones in terms of resources. I mean, I think if this is still the case, that for you and Marius, it's more work to make Oracle work than the other databases just on its own. Is that still the case?
I mean, I defer to Marius on that, but yeah. Like, Marius is an Oracle expert. He knows it. He uses it well. But yeah, at times it's fundamentally different from the other databases.
Right.
I would say it certainly takes more than 2.2% of the time to maintain.
Yeah.
And what really gets me is that Oracle Corp aren't prepared to support the Django Software Foundation, or apparently, as we've had various conversations which haven't gone anywhere, Oracle Corp aren't prepared to support the Django Software Foundation. At that point, you think, come on, people, like this is a massive corporate enterprise, a massive corporate database.
They just bought
proprietary,
TikTok.
it's closed source, like a platinum sponsorship of the Django Software Foundation would be one kind of license. One license for Oracle would be, we cover that. And it's just like crickets when we talk to them. So I do get a little bit upset with the lack of, input from Oracle there.
Yeah, well, I think there probably will come a time when there's something that requires a lot of work from the fellows and others around Oracle, and that may be the time when it's, okay, you're the only non-open source database, and I think that time will probably come.
It's just for me, it's a little bit disappointing from Oracle Corp that they aren't prepared to stand up and support the project in any way, it seems.
Yeah, I try to be positive in public, so I'll just we'll move on from Oracle, but it seems a piece with,
yes,
of a piece with how they operate. Database backends, so Redis was twice as much as memcached, which I think that makes sense. Redis, if you're starting from scratch, Redis does seem like it's the default choice. Not that there's anything wrong with memcache, but Redis more powerful.
Okay, yeah, and but from the caching point of view, like they're equally equivalent. I think people they've got Redis in play, or they were thinking about Redis in play, or Redis is on their radar, so they go with that. The interesting thing for me is we don't have a back end in core for Redis, and yet 76% of our users say they're using it. So we really need one. I mean, we're at the point where we're going to have 3 versions of the Memcache backend in core and none for Redis, and that just seems wrong.
Well, so what is it? So what is it? So what does it take to have that happen?
Well, it's just somebody to sit down and write the backend. So the API is quite small; it's only half a dozen methods, and wrap that around Redis Pi, whatever. There's Django Redis and Django Redis Cache, which are the 2 third-party packages. They could be used for inspiration. It's just a question of the time to sit down and port them in. But I think, at this stage, with the survey results as they are, I think there is a clear case for a Redis cache backend in core. And then the third-party packages can expose the further capabilities of Redis in the Django environment.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So,
moving along,
but that was one of the interesting.
Yeah, well, that was one. That's the point of the survey. That was something I think had suspected that was the case, but was very very much validated that is what the usage is in the community. Moving on to apps that people contrib apps. Admin number 1. That's probably not a surprise. Auth number 2 right there. I don't know what else. I mean, syndication. Not a lot of people using syndication, but I guess that's not terrible surprise. Flat pages still being used, but smaller amounts. So, the Python packages one was really interesting to me. And I will say, so the list came from looking at the top PyPI downloads, and Wagtail was only added after a couple days. So the Wagtail numbers are lower than they would be. That would be the 2 things I would change for next time. Is I would include Wagtail, and I would from the beginning. It was only a couple days, but I think it was like 2-3 days after the survey came out. There was a Wagtail virtual conference going on, and Jeff said, people are saying to write in Wagtail. I was like, wait, I can add that in. I should have added that in, but that I think I know that's underrepresented. But top one, PsychoPG if you're using Postgres. Yeah. That makes sense. Requests sort of makes sense. Pillow, that was a little surprising. Pillow, I mean, we would use for image uploading manipulation.
But everyone's using like Saw Thumbnail or Easy Thumbnail or these kind of things, and they all use Pillow, right? So any kind of upload an image, minimize it.
Yeah, anything with images. Gunicorn is there, Gunicorn. PyTest, I mean, not surprised that PyTest is there. Bado 3, so that would be for S3 storage for your media files or whatever else.
Or not everyone, but lots of people are using that, right?
Yeah, Black, so that's interesting. So the Python formatter, which is now part of Python, I think, or it's official, I think, in some way. I think it's the PSF, I believe, is supporting it.
Hosting
now.
it or something.
They're doing something with it. UWSGI, yeah, that makes sense. That I would think Gunicorn would be a little bit higher than UWSGI, but also quite popular. Coverage, that makes sense for testing as well.
Yeah, usual suspects, I guess.
White noise, yeah, you kind of have white noise. So anyways, it was interesting to see. I mean, there's 10 that jump out, and then not a lot of others. So
it's a massive long tail, right?
Yeah, maybe even next time I wouldn't include all those options.
I think for the third-party apps, right? So we've got Django REST Framework, debug toolbar, and then Django Celery. I'm like, come on, folks, there are other queues.
Well, Core's headers was number 2.
Was it?
Yeah, I mean, so you have to hover over. So this is the default Google layout. I don't have control over it. Core's headers is actually number 2. Then debug, Django filter, rolling in there. Django Celery, Django Celery and Django Redis right there, and 5th and 6th. So, Django extensions right below that. Someone was actually asking me. I don't know why they're asking me, but they're saying, "Oh, I wish Shell Plus was part of Django itself," because it is true that Django extensions has. I mean, I use that. A lot of people use that. If we had unlimited funds, there's probably some things from there we could just roll into Django itself, but it's a well-maintained package. So
what Shell Plus does, it automatically imports your model files, right? That's the key
exactly. So it's
thing.
Because it's every time you go into the shell, you probably need them. So and then Run Server Plus, I forget what that has some extra goodies. Though it's Django is updating, but Run Server Plus is another one of the. I mean, it's a Swiss Army knife for Django stuff, but certainly for the shell, I always use that. Django All Auth, that's a fantastic package, up to date, always used. Django Celery Beat, that's actually haven't used that myself, but that got 700 votes. So, oh, and then
you have like scheduled results, right?
Yeah, and then
So
I don't know if we
scheduled tasks.
and then the Django REST Framework JWT. So there was a whole a side
Yes, there
channel
was.
discussion about JWTs. I suppose we might as well.
Yeah, no, let's talk about it because it's kind of important in that JWTs people have come around to the idea, and like it's slowly propagating to the wider community, that JWT is a badly designed algorithm. It's sort of insecure by default because there are so many configuration options that people simply can't help but get it wrong. It's just far too complicated, and as a result of that, there are frequent security breaches because of it, or security holes because of it. So it came up, well, what should we be using for authenticating our single page application? Well, probably just sessions still. You should, if you're in a browser, use sessions. If you're in another client somewhere else, well, they can use cookies too. So, hey, just use sessions perhaps. But perhaps Django needs a more rounded story here. But JWT perhaps isn't the go-to option it should be.
Well, clients don't want to handle auth at all themselves. Is basically part of the issue, right? Your iOS, your Android app just wants to deal with a cookie, but doesn't want to.
But pretty much every library is able to handle cookies. Right? So it's not like you're writing network code yourself. You're using some networking library, and most of those have the ability to start to get a cookie from one request and then attach it to subsequent requests. It's no different than a token, right? The cookie is just the header that you send with the request. It's cookie, and then there's your cookie string, right? Whereas a JWT goes in authentication, right? And then there's your token, or OAuth token. So it's from a sort of HTTP request perspective, it's just setting a different header. So
but
do you think
the onus is on Django to change this, or it's on the clients, the mobile clients?
I think it's like Django. So to get a cookie on a response, it's just a question of implementing a view which calls authenticate, and Django will do the rest, right? So that kind of simple cookie setting login view is not going to change at all. What can we do? I don't know. I mean, is it our job to go through and say of every login option, no, this is the one you should use, this is the one you shouldn't? But I think we could perhaps call out that, hey, JWTs aren't the way to go, and you should be using session authentication still where you can.
What muddies the water a little bit is that a session ID, there's one session ID. So you have a session ID for your web client, and there would be a separate one for your iOS.
Yeah.
Right? That's why tokens exist, as a way to have a token generated for your different...
But you can log in from two browsers, right? So you can have Safari open, and you can have Chrome open, and you can have Firefox open. You can be logged into your Django site and all three of them will have a separate session ID and separate sessions.
Yeah,
right?
No, I know.
I'm trying the same with a mobile client. So look, okay, back in the day, I wrote mobile clients using JWT because I was learning, picked up REST framework, and I was like, I need some sort of authentication for my iOS client back, when iOS 3, 4, 5. What do I do? Here you are. I can use JWTs. They're the new hotness. Everyone's recommending them. Right. Fine, brilliant. They work perfectly well. I don't think about it anymore. But okay, with now knowing more and reading more in the last few months, it's like, hang on, I should have been using sessions all along. I just never thought, oh no, I'll implement session auth. I don't know. It's difficult, because developers don't know any better, and I didn't know any better at the time when I was using token auth. And for things like OAuth, that's what you're still using, a kind of token auth. You've got a bearer token, which you got off of the server when you did the OAuth login, and you use that as your credentials.
Yeah, it does seem like there is becoming this consensus. I mean, Django REST Framework, the site lists, there's almost a dozen different ways you can do authentication, in part because it doesn't want to be the arbiter of what you should do, but perhaps it's something Django itself could look at, other than saying, don't use JWTs if you're going to ask some people.
But there are, I think there's this, Pastos, I can't remember what they're even called now, but they're, an attempt to implement token-based authentication, which gets over the problems of JWT and that family. But then that would need a would need a Django REST framework simple disauth rather than
Right.
JWT.
Well, so the last section was asking about how people follow Django development. And so the top place is the blog, which is good because it's infrequently updated, but it's important things on there. Stack Overflow was number 2, which I'm not sure how you'd follow development of Django on Stack Overflow, but I suppose there's advice and questions on there, and everyone's on there anyways. Twitter, a lot of us are on Twitter, Reddit, a lot of people on Reddit. I'm not on Reddit, but Django newsletter. It's nice to see on there. We're trying to fill in the gap a little bit. Google groups, down the list. Do you have any thoughts on things that are how people follow Django development? I mean, it'd be nice if the Google groups were higher, since that's actually how development is being talked about. But I think this is more, the broader community who has questions about Django as opposed to cutting edge features.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm following it, I want to subscribe to the blog. I want to make sure I followed the blog. And then, if I'm on Twitter, I can follow a few people there. Django News, I think, for a weekly update is just a super resource. I mean, it's brilliant. You and Jeff are doing an awesome job there. Do I think more people need to be following the day-to-day conversation on Django developers? It would be nice, if you've got some time to think about, come along, join in. Because that, quite often someone will post, hey, I've got a proposal for this kind of thing. And there's half a dozen people who are like, well, let's not have that because it can change. But maybe you need that feature. Maybe you want that feature. Maybe you can talk about it. And if you do hang out on Django developers, then, you can have a say. You can be involved in it. It's the official forum, so to speak. It's like we've got the forum, which is good for discussion, but if there's anything that's going to get discussed as is this going into Django, it will be on Django developers. And we seek consensus there, and we just, we take a kind of, we try and seek consensus. We try and see, so there's this objection. Can we work with that? Can we resolve something where there is a general consensus? And if there is a general consensus, we'll make a change.
Yeah. It's working in public.
No, I mean, but that's what we aim for. That's super book as well. Like, there's if we're going to
have you gotten it yet?
I've gotten it. I'm about a third of the way through. You finished it, but it is working in public. It describes the dilemmas facing open source projects, and it kind of describes Django to a T. Like, the issues we face on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm a third of the way through. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I thought the descriptive part was great to see that it's just these things that are endemic to open source, the challenges for contributors and maintainers.
We're in the first chapter. There's this graph of commits by contributor, and it's the exact same graph. I mean, it's not because it's got different axes and different labels, but it's the exact same graph as I put up at DjangoCon a couple of years ago in my Web Needs You talk. It's like, that's the situation we're in,
Yeah, that everyone's in. And I mean, I love the analogy someone made reviewing the books, describe the Goodwill Hunting analogy for open source. Do you recall this? Where he said,
I don't.
You start off as a genius and end up as a janitor with any open source project.
No. But like, that's the fellow role, right? We're very much now handling the incoming requests, triaging the incoming requests, and we do a little bit of the code around the side. But the fellow's job is to be the janitors, to keep it clean, to keep it moving forward.
If I could have added sections to the book, I would have been interested to see how other frameworks and projects manage that, because I don't think it's that common to have paid contributors to do that. But it seems, especially the size Django is, I mean, it wouldn't work without that, right? It didn't have regular releases, because the three types of projects are: you have a solo developer, basically, you have something corporate sponsored by Facebook or Google or whatever, and then you have a nonprofit, and there's not that structure is not as common, as well as having paid contributors is less common. Because I think one of the, as we're wrapping up the podcast, one of the things she noted is that what really takes time away from maintainers is just attention, right? It's the volume of, maybe relatively low quality interactions. You want to encourage people, but that becomes very draining, and so you spend all your time kind of doing maintenance and inbound as opposed to coding and moving forward, which is the rewarding part.
Yeah. I mean, there can be high quality interactions as well. Like there can be some really quite sticky point, which there's not necessarily an agreement on, and so it can take an hour to craft the perfect reply, and then turns out it wasn't the perfect reply, and so but I can't spend all week on this one issue.
Yeah,
because we get 5 new tickets a day every day.
Yeah. I mean, in a much more minor way, but I have that issue with I give my email out to anyone who buys my books and places, and so I get a lot of emails, and it's a lot of time for me, and it sort of, I think, keeps me in tune with the community. But sometimes I think, I wish I had fewer emails, but I can't. There are these fantastic emails from random people asking me either a really deep question I hadn't thought about, or rephrasing how I show something, or finding a subtle bug. There's fortunately very few bugs in my books because they're kind of out, but I can't just look at something and tell if it's quality or not. It deserves attention, but there is a cost to that.
Every single thing you have to give it enough thought to determine whether or not it's valid, and whether or not it's a real issue.
The technical ones, sometimes I batch them so I can hit them first in the morning, where I see something, I'm like, either maybe they have something wrong on their end, but also could be something in Django, could be something I really need to dive into, but similar type of thing. It can be draining, but it's also educational. Anyways, I think we've believed.
So anyway, that was something of Working in Public, awesome book, came up this summer. We'll put a link to that in the show notes.
And we will. So this is coming out. We will have got a whole bunch of guests coming up. We'll have guests in 2 weeks, and that'll be the new schedule, and we're going to try that out. It's hopefully be fine for everyone. Anything else as we head out, Carlton?
No, just welcome back. And
welcome back. I miss talking to you, Carlton. We haven't talked. It's
been it's just been a funny year. But yes, I've missed missed our little tete-a-tete.
Yes, I'll add links to the Django Con Europe videos as well in here when that all is up. Looking forward to your talk.
Thank you.
You can follow us on Twitter at chatdjango or djangochat.com, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Yeah, join us next time. Bye-bye.